you, Bridget. So today our guest speaker is Bridget Ward, and she will be telling you all about the awesome work that she does. So without further ado, go ahead, Bridget, and you can get started.
Well, thank you, Ria, for this awesome craft. You can see I had two volcanic eruptions in my climate. So that came out really cool. I'm going to share that with my students. I am going to just take a second and share the screen. Well, thank you everyone for coming today or tonight, or depending on where you're coming from and where you're located. I hope everyone can hear me well. It looks like it. My name is Bridget Ward, and I'm a PolarTREC teacher. So I actually do teach as my full-time job. I'm a high school biology and ecology teacher in Massachusetts. And PolarTREC is a awesome program that hooks up teachers with polar scientists and sends us with research teams to either Arctic or Antarctica every year, except for obviously this last year due to the pandemic. But my project is called Growing Up on Ice. And I work with Weddell seals. And you could see a little pup in the image there, and that's me. I know that we learned about so many bases today in Antarctica, but I actually worked at Mcmurdo Station. So the name of our project is Growing Up on Ice, and we study the early development of Weddell seal pups. So we're on the ice, we're trying to figure out when they are born. Unfortunately, we've never seen, I've never seen one born. It's really hard to catch one being born. We were like minutes late one day, but they're so cute. This is the research team I worked with. We're a 7-woman team, and we have Heather Luanig, Linnea Pearson, Heather Harris, Emily Whitmere, Emma Weitzner, Aaron Brody, and myself. And we're also known as Team Bravo 030. And the team itself is out of Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo and the Marine Mammal Center. And that's going to make much more sense in a second. So everyone on a research team has a really important role, and it's a special role. So starting on the left side, we have Dr. Linnea Pearson. She's a co-principal investigator. She's she's one of our 2 leaders. Erin Brody is next. She's a veterinarian technician. Dr. Heather Luanig she's our principal investigator. Again, she's from Cal Poly. That's where she teaches full time. Then there's me. I'm a PolarTREC teacher, educator. Emma Weitzer was a graduate student. She's working on her doctorate. And then we had 2 field veterinarians, Heather Harris and Emily Whitmere. And that's all of us just one day down in Mcmurdo Station sign. But a team is so much more. It takes so many people to come together and support a research team when it's in the field. So here's some other members, other people that have actually been down in Antarctica because it's a multi-year project. We have Lars, Sean, Sophie, and Melissa. And then we have the Brewster brothers that build our tools that we use down in the field. So even if they're not in the field that year with us, since this is a multi-year investigation, they are so important. Another team we want to thank is Bravo 009. They've been about 30 years working down in Antarctica, right on the Ross Sea Ice shelf where we work. And they go ahead and tag every seal pup that is born with that little tag so we can correctly identify them, because though they're cute, it is hard to tell them apart. So thank you to Bravo 009. And there's a link to their website if you want to see any of their data. They're a very hardworking team. They actually will sleep out on the ice. It's kind of amazing. So Antarctica, right? How do you even get down there? So usually there's one of two ways to get down there. You can actually take a ship from the South America, tip and go across Drake's Passage and end up in Antarctica. But what I did is I flew. It did not have to get seasick on a ship. So I took a C-17. That plane is right behind me. And we actually landed on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is when we had that trivia question about how thick it is a mile thick. So the plane actually comes in and lands on that ice shelf. And it's really weird to think that you're landing on ice. This is when I first arrived down in Antarctica, and the ice is very thick still and hard. As the season progresses, that top layer can actually start to melt, and they will switch to a plane with skis on it so it doesn't get stuck in the slushiness. But it always refreezes. This is Mcmurdo Station. It's a small little town, but it is a very functioning town. I actually have a 360 video tour available on YouTube. If you look up a 360 Mcmurdo Station tour, I completely filmed a lap around the center of town if you want to take a tour yourself. It's kind of remarkable how much our station actually had. So, what is it like to live on base in Antarctica? It's basically like going to college, and I know a lot of you haven't been there yet, but some of you have. It's just like college. You have a dorm room that you share with a roommate. This is actually my dorm room at the top left-hand corner. We have lounges to the right. That's how we got internet. There was 3 internet cables usually in each lounge, and you had to plug in. The science wing had, where we actually do our work in the lab, they had additional Wi-Fi available. It was very, very slow as more and more people got on base. And then we have the galley, where it's just a giant cafeteria. Think about a fantastic food court that you've been to, or a nice big buffet. It's all you can eat, especially for us people, our scientists that have been going out into the field. We need to eat a lot of calories to keep us energized in the field. And then there's a picture of me in our science lab. One of the things that actually surprised me when I was down in Antarctica was it didn't feel too cold. Currently, I'm in Massachusetts. We just came out of the winter. Uh, I actually wear a lot of the clothes that I wear in the field out in the middle of the winter here to go like snowshoeing or just on a walk outside. Or if it's just cold, I layer up because I have these layers now. But as you could see while I was down there, it actually got into the positive 20s as temperature, and that sounds so funny. But it was a nice warm day. We didn't have to have our giant red jackets on. We were just in a fleece jacket working. It was really nice. The coldest day we were out in the field was -40, and it had nasty winds that day. So it did get really cold as well. Don't let me fool you with the 20s, especially some of you are in New Jersey. Uh, so you know what the 20s feel like. You know what -5 feels like. It's not that much worse than your coldest day on a typical Antarctica summer day. Antarctica winter, it's a completely different story. So what did I wear? I just said it wasn't that bad every day. On a cold day, I wore 20 pounds of clothes. So that's my before, and that's after. I'm standing on a scale. I have my bunny boots on. I have my big red jacket on. I actually have 5 layers of pants on in that picture. And it can be hard to move. It can be hard to walk. You get used to it. everyone falls down occasionally, but you get right back up. And I guess I found the hardest thing is the jacket was a little too long for me. I'm only about 5'3", so the jacket sometimes got in my way when I was trying to move around with all those pants on, or if I was trying to get on my snowmobile. There was actually a zipper that zips from the bottom up to make it a little bit easier to get around. So that's what I typically wore in a day. Like I said, up to 5 layers of pants. I usually had about 5 layers on my upper body. Fleece was fantastic. The only thing I really want to point out here is we had no cotton on. Cotton can absorb sweat, and you do sweat. You're moving around, your body's generating heat. And if you wear cotton, it traps your sweat and it will freeze, and that is bad for your body. So nothing we wore was made out of cotton. So a daily schedule, not that much different than maybe your school schedule. 6:30, we would wake up, we would go to the cafeteria and get breakfast, prep for our day, get everything packed. We had to pack our own lunches because we were going to be out in the field. If it was going to be a long day, I would pack ramen. We had some nice hot water with us, and that was always a nice lunch treat. My snack of choice was Pop-Tarts. So just typical getting ready for work. Our commute was anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what we were taking for transportation. Once we got to the site, we took care of ourselves. A lot of times we ate lunch right away so we could work straight in the afternoon. And then we'd work from anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And it was really important to have those snacks and bathroom breaks and to realize when we needed to take a break. We're burning a lot of calories working in a very cold environment. And if you start to shiver, that means you need to take a break and get a snack. It took us about an hour every day to clean up from whatever we were doing, and then 45 minutes to 2 hours to come back to base. We had to refuel all our transportation, unpack, process any samples that we collected, try to get everything we need ready for the next day, and then we got to go eat dinner. So our two ways of commuting to our work sites every day were either by snowmobile, which went much faster, or piston bully there to the right. The piston bully topped out around 8 miles per hour. The benefit of the piston bully was it was heated. So if it was a really cold, windy day, we would all pack into that piston bully to protect ourselves from the wind and get a little bit of heat. We had two field sites. The first one, the top one, is called Hutton Cliffs. We have what we work in is called an apple there, that little red image. And then Turtle Rock, we had an actual hut, and that hut was heated. So that was always a nice break from the wind, and it was nice to have heat. So our Waddell seals, that little guy right there, they were named after the British sealing captain, James Waddell. And they are very special, and why we study them is they're the southernmost breeding mammal on our planet. And they are distributed all around the Antarctica fast ice. So fast ice is what forms in the winter and then melts in the spring and summer, opening to the Ross Sea. Okay, so not that ice shelf that we land our planes on. They like to eat Antarctica cod, silverfish, squid, octopus, krill, and an adult can be 8 to 11 feet long and 900 to 1,300 pounds. So their mamas were really big. So some quick facts. It usually takes about 35 to 52 days for a pup to wean. This is about 7 weeks. And they're born with this very fluffy, soft fur called lanugo. And their moms milk is actually super fatty, which helps them bulk up and gain weight fast. And we're going to be looking at those numbers today. But at birth, they're about 70 pounds and they gain about 4 pounds a day. And so just think about that. And their mom size does decrease over the 7 weeks as they're taking care of their pups. I did notice that while we were out on the ice. So our research questions were, how does these little 70-pound pups stay warm on the Antarctica ice? And how do they develop into amazing divers? Because they are pretty amazing. So there's two thermal images there, and you can see in week 1, it's the image says it's about 14.9 degrees Celsius, and at week 7, that pup is all the way up to 30.3 degrees Celsius. So it does, and you can see the heat is radiating off of it. Just notice the color change, right? So there's two ways the pup stays warm. One is that fur that I was talking about, that lanugo. And fur is really nice because it traps heat or traps air, and that air actually provides a layer of insulation. And the other is a technique that you've probably heard a lot of other marine mammals have is blubber. So there is actually an image that we took from one of the pups. It's called an ultrasound. You may have heard of it, and from your doctor's office is the exact same thing. You put a little gel and a little reader, and it actually shows an image of what's underneath the skin. And when blubber has these small little blood vessels, and when it's cold, they get a little bit smaller, and that helps the animals not need as much energy to help stay warm. So let's talk about this pup development. Week 1, early dependency. We always saw the pups and the mom, they were feeding a lot. But by week 3, they were starting to get into that cold Antarctica water. It was so amazing to think about this little seal that's not so little anymore at 3 weeks, but it's still a little pup and it's starting to learn how to swim. At 5 weeks, it's more independent. And at 7 weeks, it's fully weaned. So they nurse from their mom for about 6 to 7 weeks. And that's just an average. Some some nurse for a little bit more, longer time than others. So while in the field, you could see the ultrasound machine there to the right. That's how we took the blubber depth. It's portable. And then when we're working with the pups, we actually measure them at multiple points, okay? So I put a couple lines on that pup to show you where we take our tape measure and just measure them out. So that little Weddell seal right there is just taking a nap. And so we take its curve length, that's that orange line, from its nose to right where its tail starts. That black arrow shows where we take the ultrasound machine and we measure the blubber depth. The green line, we actually go around the Weddell seal's body and measure its girth. So just think of a big tape measure around the center of your waist, okay? And then a straight length to nose is that purple line. Think about when you go up to a wall as straight as you possibly can. And we go from the seal's nose all the way to where its tail starts. So we actually worked with 12 Weddell seal pups, but we're going to be focusing on these 6. We have Mr. Goodbar, Carmelo, Smarty, Sweetheart, Charlton Chew, and Twix. Hopefully you can see a theme here. They were all named after candies. So here's some images of them growing up, and they're adorable. But start to take notice about how their lanugo starts to disappear, and they start to look like an adult seal at 7 weeks old. So that's Mr. Goodbar growing up. Here's Carmelo growing up. Look at it. He was a little chubby at 1 week old with all his lanugo all wrinkled up there, always next to his mom. And you could see how his lanugo in week 7 started to come off in patches, and still had some, but also that fluffy fur is gone in some spots. Here's Smarty. Look at week 5. There's only a couple patches of that lanugo fur. Mom looks very happy in week 3. Charleston Chew here started losing its lanugo in patches around 3 weeks old. Was always in the water around 5 weeks, and just had a couple patches of lanugo left at 7 weeks. Sweetheart wasn't always so sweet. Look at that wide open yawn at 3 weeks old. And there you can see her right next to her mom at week 7. That's a great comparison to see the full-grown seal versus the pup. Sorry about that. All right, so let's take a look at the 7 weeks of life here. I put this in pounds, so we're talking about mass in pounds here. And so if you notice at week 1, the seals range from anywhere from 80 to 112 pounds. That may be about the size of some of you. Oh, middle schoolers that are joining us tonight. Maybe you're about the size of a week 3 Weddell seal pup. I'm a little bit bigger than a 1 week old Weddell seal pup. We actually practiced with me being a 1 week old Weddell seal pup. It was a good time. And then at the week 7, our largest Weddell seal pup by mass was Smarty at 237 pounds. And she started off at 90 pounds at week 1. So we don't work with them for the first week of life. But if you notice the blubber depth, now this is in inches, so they all started out with at least ½ inch of blubber on their back. And Charleston Chew actually won out on the blubber depth. So where we had Smarty coming in at the greatest mass, she was 3rd for the greatest blubber depth. So one of the other things that we looked at was lanugo. And so if you look at this image, we have that fluffy lanugo, soft fur, and then we have a molting Weddell seal pup, and that's when that lanugo comes off in patches. And then the juvenile coat, it still has hair, okay? It's still a mammal, it has hair, but it's not that fluffy fur anymore. So as the experiment went on, we did make and record observations about how much lanugo the pups still had with them. And each one was given a quantitative number. So 0 was no melting. 1 was a little bit, usually losing from the head and neck and flippers at first. And then it starts to go down their sides and comes off their sides of their bodies or their flanks. And then if there's just a few patches of lanugo left, we gave it a 3. And once all that baby soft fur lanugo was gone, it was considered fully molted. And you can see all those images right there. If you're looking across Carmelo, at the end of week 7, still had a few fur patches. So did Charleston Chew. But Sweet Tart, Mr. Goodbar, and Smarty all were fully molted by week 7, that juvenile coat. And that's just the summary. If you're trying to figure out in your head who got biggest, who lost their fur, or the lanugo the fastest, there you go. Take a minute and think about which one you thought was the biggest. So Charleston Chew is definitely up there, but Charleston Chew did not molt into his juvenile coat all the way. So there's 2 ways these pups could stay warm, by insulation and metabolic rate. That's exactly how we stay warm. Now there's a picture of me jumping on the rough ice shelf. And I am fully geared up. I have all those layers. I have about 20 pounds of clothes on. That is one way I can stay warm on the ice. And the other is to make sure I take in a lot of food and put a lot of calories in my body. And that was one of the things that we're studying. We're trying to figure out the insulation versus the metabolic rate. So how do we measure metabolic rate? We have a chamber right there, and in that chamber we can measure how much oxygen the Weddell seal pup is consuming, right? So there's always the exact same amount of oxygen in there. It's just we can tell how much the Weddell seal pup is breathing in, and then we can use that information to convert to figure out what its metabolic rate is. And the important thing about that is because Weddell seal pups maintain homeostasis just like you do, that stable body temperature. So unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to go to Cal Poly and analyze this data yet, but hopefully soon. And the other thing that we were investigating is how do they develop into such amazing divers? And when I say amazing divers, they can dive almost a mile down under the ice, 3/4 of a mile. They can hold their breath for up to 90 minutes. Now, if you've ever watched The Little Mermaid, that would be able to hold your breath for the whole movie of The Little Mermaid. That's a long time. And one really cool thing about them, okay, is think about what you're going to do if you dive under the ice into the water, right? You're going to go, oh, and then dive down. That's not what they do. They breathe everything out. They take a major exhale and then they dive. So they can't be storing their oxygen in their lungs, okay? They actually store it in their blood and muscle. So just a little image to give you an idea how far they dive down. If you've ever seen the Empire State Building, stack 3 of those on top of each other. Okay, they can dive that deep. The elephant seal, which is also found off the coast of California, if we have any California viewers, they can spend about 2 hours under the water. So I just talked about the fact that they breathe out before they dive. So if you look at that image, you can see that us humans, we would store about 24% of that oxygen in our lungs that we were going to keep with us underneath the water. They only store about 7%. And they store the rest in their muscles and cardiac system or blood. and how we measure their dive behavior, we actually put time depth recorders on their tail. They didn't even notice. They're just hanging out. And what was really kind of hard is to make sure you don't lose those on the ice. They do just fall off because it's just glue. I know that was a lot of information really quick. If you want to find out more, you can check out my journal. Also, you can message me there and I can answer your questions. And our Growing Up on Ice team has its own website and Facebook. If you want to reach out and learn more, okay? Is there any questions? And yeah, we did see penguins. And just a quick thank you to Rutgers, the NSF, and Arcus. I'm open for questions.
Thanks, Bridget. That was a really cute presentation as well as informative, but super adorable. I love the so if you go to the Google Doc, there are a bunch of questions there. If you need the link, I can send it to you.
I would appreciate it if you could just send me the link. Thank you. It says this page can't be reached. But Ben's question just came up in the chat for me. So that's a really great question. Why did Carmilla lose weight? So some of the Weddell Seal pups started to wean faster. They stopped nursing, and they actually can start to lose weight before they start to. We didn't take any information on when they started to eat, but they did. Like if a pup stops nursing, then they can start to lose weight.
Were you able to get access, or would you like, I can read the questions too if you want.
I'm gonna try one more time to copy and paste it. Oh, here we go, the copy paste. So what was my favorite part about being in Antarctica? I was the best scientist summer camp ever. Okay. There was so much science going on and it was so much fun all the time. If we were at lunch, we were not the only research team down there. So we just got to do science all the time, all day, every day. And I met the nicest people. I swear, they just shipped them all down there. Everyone was so nice on base. I would totally go back. I mean, probably not right now, not during their winter, but during the Antarctica summer season, I would totally go back. I would live there every year. It would be fine. The only thing I really missed was tomatoes and avocados because we don't really get fresh fruits and vegetables often. The hardest thing to adjust with the weather in Antarctica was the fact that the sun was up all the time. So it was hard to know to go to bed. You're doing a lot of work, which is helpful. So if you end up leaving late, you can stay out late, that you don't have to worry about the sunset. It's not going to get dark on you. You have to worry about like the weather itself. But it was really hard to realize it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You have to be up in 4 hours. It's just because it's not dark doesn't mean don't need to go to bed. A lot of us had like thick blankets over our bedroom windows that we would close to try to like trick our body into thinking it's dark. I think one of the things I miss about being in Antarctica is I really liked working with the Weddell Seal pups. I know they get bigger, but it was like definitely an adventure every day. Snowmobiling on the ice was so much fun. Like, we definitely had a good time. And we played board games at night, which is always a good time. The coldest temperature was definitely in, I think it was negative 40s with 40-mile-per-hour winds. So to figure out that wind chill, it was a very cold, windy day. We actually had fantastic weather. We go by conditions. So there was never a condition that was dangerous that we couldn't leave base. There's conditions where you sometimes can't even go outside on base, and we didn't experience any of those days, so that was really nice about our work. And the warmest day was definitely in the 20s. I felt like I was just in like a long sleeve and one layer of pants. It was a very light experience for me after wearing 20 pounds of clothes a day. All right, so in the beginning, when you're starting to put this 20 pounds of clothes on a day, it does take a while. The most important thing is not to lose any layers along the way. But we got it down to, I want to say about 10 minutes. The hardest thing to do is to remember to put on your bibs, your snow pants before your boots, because you have so many layers of pants on already that you kind of forget. And then if you put your boots on, you have to take them off again to put on that extra outer layer. What kind of penguins did you see? We saw 2 emperor penguins, and then after I left, Adele's were around. The seals are not aggressive at all. They don't have any predators on the ice. So they were in the water, not during birthing season. They would have orcas and leopard seals to kind of worry about. But on the ice, they have no predators and they don't, humans have never been aggressive towards them. So they really don't care that we're there, which is kind of a really out of the world experience. You could just walk up to them and they honestly don't care that you're there. When are the seal pups born? October-ish. Most are born in October. And do the females have pups every season? So that would be a question that you could actually find the answer to from the Bravo 009 team. They record which seals have pups each year, which is a really cool like lineage thing if you're into that. How did I get it involved with PolarTREC? PolarTREC is just an amazing program. I found it because I was interested in learning more about Antarctica because it was one of my weaker points in teaching that I didn't know about and I wanted to learn more. So I found this program and there's an application process and you apply and the applications get narrower and narrower, and then they usually give 3 or 4 applicants to each research team, and the research team actually gets to interview you and pick which teacher or educator, because you don't have to be a teacher, you can be maybe you work at a museum or a camp, an informal educator is allowed to apply to. And it's a really great program to check out if you're interested. Lifespan of seals. I want to say they live up to 30 years. Pretty sure. So somebody just asked, do you reapply? You can reapply. There's a couple educators that have gone multiple times. Usually people just go once. But when you are in an experience like that, you stay in contact with your research team. I met so many researchers and we're in constant contact. Facebook is definitely a great venue for staying in contact with all these different researchers. and just reaching out, even if I just have a question or my students will come up with a question that I don't know the answer to, and I'm like, oh, I know a research team for that one. And I usually, within the week, I have an answer for them from one of these amazing people. So what species of seals was I studying? Weddell. How many species are there in Antarctica? There are a lot of species in Antarctica. The food web is very vast. I can't answer that question. I don't know if any research team is actually investigating this question per se. Is climate change affecting the lifestyles of these animals? I don't know. I don't think anyone's have published information exactly on that question. I know the melting sea ice, if the pup is with their mom and the sea ice isn't going to be there for 7 weeks anymore, that would be an issue for them in the future. You think seals consume more or less oxygen than humans? That is a really good question because you're right. I haven't analyzed any data yet. My guess would be more because they're trying to stay warm. Where I had a lot of clothes on, they didn't have that nice special feature, but they do have blubber. So it's really hard to say because they were so much bigger than me, even with all my clothes on. It's a hard call right there. I think that, oh, I think we answered all of these questions. If anyone had anything else, the natural predators, uh, orcas, leopard seals, they can get into fights with other Weddells.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I think you answered all of the questions. That was really great. And thank you again, and thank you to our audience for joining us for our late night today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and thanks. And don't forget to join us for our next virtual event, which will be on Friday, April 23rd at 1 p.m. And we will have Dr. Elizabeth Padilla Crespo. She's a distinguished research professor at the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico at Aguadilla, and she will be talking about microbes, the unseen majority. And so that is our next virtual event on April 23rd. And our next late night event will be next month. That will be on May 5th on Wednesday, and it'll be about virtual meteorites. And Julianne Gross will be talking about her experience also in Antarctica. So you'll get to hear more about that, but from a different aspect since she was looking for meteorites. So again, Bridget, thank you so much. It was wonderful having you, and have a great rest of your evening.